My daughter called me her biggest mistake, then asked me for a favor that changed everything. They say you can't choose your family, but what happens when your family chooses to forget you? Hey everyone, before we get into the video, don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button if you want more stories just like this. Thanks for the support. Michael, 45, stared at the faded photograph on his mantelpiece. It was taken 20 years ago, on his daughter Jessica's 5th birthday. In the photo, Michael was kneeling beside Jessica, both covered in cake frosting, their faces alight with joy. Those were simpler times, before the world complicated their relationship in ways Michael could never have anticipated. Jessica had been the center of Michael's universe from the moment she was born. Her mother, Rebecca, had left when Jessica was just 2 years old, unable to handle the responsibilities of motherhood. Michael remembered the day clearly. Rebecca had packed a single bag, kissed Jessica's sleeping forehead, and walked out without a backward glance. Michael had found her note on the kitchen counter. "I'm sorry. I can't do this." From that day forward, Michael had dedicated his life to raising Jessica alone. He worked 2 jobs to provide for her, often sacrificing his own needs, and wants to ensure she had everything she required. He was there for every scraped knee, every nightmare, every school project, and every milestone. Their bond was unbreakable, forged in the fires of adversity and strengthened by their mutual dependence on each other. As Jessica grew, Michael watched with pride as she blossomed into a bright, curious child. She had his eyes, a deep, thoughtful brown, and her mother's stubborn determination. Michael made sure to tell Jessica about her mother, not wanting to create a fantasy version of a woman who had chosen to leave, but also not wanting to paint her as a villain. He explained that sometimes adults made choices they couldn't explain, and that her mother's departure had nothing to do with Jessica. Elementary school years were filled with parent-teacher conferences, soccer games, and ballet recitals. Michael was the only father who showed up to the Mothers and Muffins Day at school, earning him strange looks from other parents, but a proud hug from Jessica. He learned to braid her hair, pack lunches with the right balance of nutrition and treats, and even helped her navigate the treacherous waters of childhood friendships. The first signs of change appeared when Jessica entered middle school. Suddenly, her father's presence became a source of embarrassment rather than comfort. She no longer wanted him to walk her to the bus stop, cringed when he kissed her forehead in public, and began to hide the handmade lunches he prepared for her each morning. Michael understood that this was a normal part of growing up, the need for independence, the desire to fit in with peers, but still stung. He tried to give her space while remaining available, a delicate balancing act that left him feeling like he was walking on eggshells. The more he pulled back, the more she seemed to push away, creating a chasm between them that widened with each passing day. By the time Jessica was in 8th grade, she had stopped bringing friends home, citing Michael's weird habits and embarrassing dad jokes. Michael tried to modify his behavior to become the cool, detached parent he thought she wanted, but it felt like wearing a costume that didn't fit. He was a father who loved his daughter fiercely and openly, and suppressing that natural instinct felt like a betrayal of himself. The summer before high school, Jessica received a scholarship to a prestigious private academy on the other side of town. It was an opportunity Michael couldn't let her refuse. Even though it meant she would be attending school with children from wealthier families, children who might judge her for her modest background and single-parent household. Michael worked even harder to afford the uniform, books, and extracurricular fees associated with the academy. He took on a 3rd job, delivering newspapers in the early morning hours before his regular workday began. The exhaustion was overwhelming, but seeing the excitement in Jessica's eyes made it worthwhile. On the first day of school, Michael dropped Jessica off in front of the imposing brick building. As she got out of their old, beat-up car, she looked around nervously at the other students stepping out of luxury vehicles. Before closing the door, she turned to Michael with a request that would foreshadow the changes to come. "Dad, could you maybe drop me off a block away from school from now on? I don't want people to see our car." Michael's heart sank, but he nodded with a forced smile. "Of course, sweetie. Whatever makes you comfortable." As he watched her walk away, backpack slung over her shoulder, He couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. The distance between them was no longer just physical. It was emotional, a growing void that Michael feared he might never be able to cross again. The first year of high school marked a dramatic transformation in Jessica's behavior and attitude towards Michael. What had begun as a typical teenage desire for independence quickly morphed into something more concerning. A deep-seated shame about her humble beginnings and the father who had sacrificed everything for her. Jessica excelled academically at the prestigious academy, earning top grades and praise from her teachers. Michael was proud of her achievements, attending every awards ceremony and parent-teacher conference. But Jessica's invitations became less frequent. When he did attend, she would introduce him as her guardian rather than her father, a subtle but painful distinction that didn't go unnoticed. At home, Jessica became increasingly secretive. She spent hours in her room with the door closed, emerging only for meals or when she needed something. Conversations became monosyllabic exchanges, with Jessica offering little information about her life at school or her new circle of friends. Michael tried to bridge the growing gap between them, asking about her day, her interests, her friends, but was met with sighs, eye rolls, or the dreaded teenage response, "It's fine." The financial disparity between Jessica and her wealthy classmates became a source of tension. Michael worked tirelessly to provide her with the necessities and occasional luxuries, but it was never enough to satisfy Jessica's growing desire to fit in with her affluent peers. She began to lie about her background, creating elaborate stories about her family's supposed wealth and status. Michael discovered this deception when he overheard a phone conversation between Jessica and a friend. She was describing a fictional vacation in Europe, a summer home in the Hamptons, and a mother who was a successful fashion designer in Paris. The lies cut deeper than any insult Jessica had ever directed at him. It wasn't just that she was ashamed of their financial situation. She was ashamed of him, of their life together, of the very foundation of their relationship. When Michael confronted Jessica about the lies, she became defensive and angry. She accused him of eavesdropping, of not trusting her, of trying to control her life. The argument escalated. Words were exchanged that couldn't be taken back. And for the first time, Jessica screamed something that would haunt Michael for years to come. "I wish you weren't my father. You're the biggest mistake of my life." The words hung in the air like poison, each one a dagger to Michael's heart. He saw the flicker of regret in Jessica's eyes immediately after she said it, but the damage was done. She had verbalized the unspoken fear that had been growing in Michael's mind for months, that she was ashamed of him, that she wished for a different life, a different family. Jessica didn't apologize that night, nor in the days that followed. The silence between them grew heavier, more oppressive. Michael retreated into himself, questioning every decision he had made as a parent. Had he been too protective? Not protective enough? Had he failed to prepare her for the challenges of navigating different social circles? Had he somehow failed as a father? As Jessica progressed through high school, the rift between them widened. She excelled academically, earning a full scholarship to a prestigious university on the East Coast. Michael was both proud and heartbroken, proud of her achievements, but heartbroken that she would soon be moving even further away. The summer before college was tense and awkward. Jessica spent most of her time with friends, rarely at home. When she was home, she was distant, preoccupied with her impending departure. Michael tried to create meaningful moments, suggesting activities they used to enjoy together, but Jessica was always too busy or uninterested. The night before Jessica left for college, Michael prepared her favorite meal, hoping for one last evening of connection. Jessica picked at her food, her mind already miles away. When Michael tried to express how much he would miss her, she responded with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Dad, we'll still talk. And it's not like I'm moving to another country. You can visit if you want." The conditional nature of her offer, "if you want," stung, but Michael nodded, trying to mask his disappointment. He had hoped for more, for some acknowledgement of their shared history, for some expression of affection or gratitude. Instead, he received indifference, as if their years together had meant nothing to her. The next morning, Michael helped Jessica load her belongings into the car he had borrowed from a coworker. The drive to the airport was silent, each lost in their own thoughts. At the terminal, Michael reached for a hug, but Jessica pulled back, offering a stiff, awkward embrace instead. "I'll call you when I get settled," she said, already turning away. Michael watched her walk toward the security checkpoint, her small figure disappearing into the crowd. He stood there long after she was gone, the weight of her absence settling heavily upon him. The daughter he had raised, the child he had loved with every fiber of his being, was gone, replaced by a stranger who bore her face. In the months that followed, Jessica's calls became less frequent, then sporadic, then almost non-existent. Michael would leave messages that went unanswered for weeks. When they did speak, the conversations were brief and one-sided, with Jessica doing most of the talking about her new life, her new friends, her new experiences, rarely asking about Michael's life or well-being. Michael tried to understand, to remind himself that this was a natural part of growing up, of children leaving the nest. But there was something more to Jessica's distance, something deeper and more painful than the typical parent-child separation. It was as if she was systematically erasing him from her life, piece by piece, until there would be nothing left of their shared history. 5 years passed. Michael continued to work, to live, to exist in the quiet emptiness Jessica had left behind. He had made peace with their distant relationship, accepting that this was the new reality, the price of her success and independence. He had even begun to build a new life for himself, reconnecting with old friends, taking up hobbies he had neglected while raising Jessica, and finding contentment in his own company. Then, one ordinary Tuesday evening, as Michael was preparing dinner for one, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he hadn't seen in years, Jessica's. His heart raced as he debated whether to answer, unsure if he was ready for whatever she might say or ask. The phone continued to ring, its insistent tone echoing in the quiet apartment. Michael stared at the screen, at the name that had once been the center of his world, but now felt like that of a stranger. Jessica. It had been nearly 2 years since their last brief conversation, and even longer since they had seen each other in person. With a deep breath, Michael answered the call. "Hello, Dad? It's Jessica." The sound of her voice, unchanged yet somehow different, sent a jolt through Michael's system. He hadn't realized how much he had missed hearing it until that moment. "Jessica, how are you? Is everything okay?" Michael asked, trying to keep his voice steady. There was a pause on the other end, a hesitation that set Michael's nerves on edge. When she finally spoke, her voice was strained, lacking the confidence and indifference he had grown accustomed to. I'm fine, Dad. Listen, I need to ask you something. It's important." Michael's mind raced through a dozen scenarios, each more unlikely than the last. Was she in trouble? Was she getting married? Was she finally reaching out to reconnect after all these years? "Of course, Jessica. What is it?" Michael replied, trying to mask the hope that was building in his chest. Another pause, longer this time. Michael could hear her breathing, could almost picture her wrestling with whatever she needed to say. "I need to see you. In person. Can I come visit? This weekend." The request caught Michael off guard. Jessica had never initiated a visit in all the years she had been away. She had made excuses every time Michael had suggested visiting her, claiming she was too busy with school, then work, then her social life. The sudden reversal was suspicious, to say the least. "This weekend? That's soon," Michael stammered, trying to process the request. "Is everything all right? You sound upset." "I'm fine, Dad. Really. I need to talk to you about something. Face to face." Michael's instincts told him to be cautious, to protect himself from whatever emotional turmoil Jessica might bring into his carefully constructed peace. But the father in him, the part of him that would always love his daughter unconditionally, couldn't say no. "Of course, Jessica. You know you're always welcome here. When should I expect you?" There was an audible sigh of relief on the other end of the line. "Thank you, Dad. I'll drive down Saturday morning." "Is that okay?" "That's fine. Do you need me to pick you up from somewhere?" "No, I'll rent a car. I'll text you when I'm close." They said their goodbyes, and Michael hung up, his mind reeling from the unexpected conversation. He looked around his small apartment, suddenly seeing it through Jessica's eyes. The modest furniture, the worn-out sofa, the second-hand television. Would she still be ashamed of him, of their life together? Or had time and distance given her a new perspective? The next few days passed in a blur of anticipation and anxiety. Michael cleaned the apartment until it sparkled, bought groceries for meals Jessica used to enjoy, and even considered digging out old photo albums before deciding against it. He didn't want to appear desperate or nostalgic. Didn't want to give Jessica the impression that he had been pining for her all these years. On Saturday morning, Michael woke early, his stomach churning with nervous energy. He made coffee, paced the apartment, checked his appearance multiple times in the mirror, and waited. And waited. Hours passed with no word from Jessica. Michael tried to distract himself with household chores, with television, with anything to keep his mind from imagining the worst. By late afternoon, Michael had resigned himself to the fact that Jessica wasn't coming. She had changed her mind, found something better to do, or perhaps this had all been a cruel joke. He shouldn't have been surprised. This was the Jessica he had come to know in recent years, self-absorbed and inconsiderate of others' feelings. Just as Michael was about to give up and go out for dinner to escape his disappointment, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was Jessica. "Sorry, running late. Be there in an hour." Michael's relief was immediately replaced by a fresh wave of anxiety. He quickly prepared a simple meal, set the table, and took a few deep breaths to calm his racing heart. He wanted to appear composed, unaffected, as if this unexpected visit was nothing out of the ordinary. Exactly 1 hour later, there was a knock at the door. Michael's hand trembled as he reached for the doorknob, his heart pounding in his chest. He took one last deep breath, then opened the door to face the daughter he hadn't seen in nearly 3 years. Jessica stood on the doorstep, older and more sophisticated than he remembered. She wore expensive clothes, carried a designer handbag, and had the polished look of someone who had fully embraced the upper-class lifestyle she had once only pretended to be a part of. But beneath the surface, Michael noticed something else, a weariness in her eyes, a tension in her posture that suggested all was not as perfect as it appeared. "Hi, Dad," she said, offering a small, hesitant smile. "Jessica, come in," Michael replied, stepping aside to let her enter. As Jessica walked into the apartment, Michael couldn't help but notice the subtle way her eyes scanned the room, taking in the modest furnishings and simple decor. He braced himself for the judgment, the criticism, the condescending comments he had grown accustomed to in her teenage years. Instead, Jessica surprised him. "It's nice, Dad. Cozy." The compliment caught Michael off guard, but he recovered quickly. "Can I get you something to drink? I made dinner if you're hungry." "Actually, I'm not very hungry," Jessica replied, setting her bag on the couch. "But some water would be nice." As Michael went to the kitchen, Jessica followed, her presence filling the small space in a way it hadn't in years. Michael could feel her eyes on him as he poured a glass of water, could sense the unspoken words hanging in the air between them. When he turned to hand her the glass, their eyes met, and for a moment, Michael saw the daughter he had raised, the little girl who had depended on him for everything. The moment passed quickly, replaced by the guarded stranger sitting before him. "Thanks," Jessica said, taking the glass. "Dad, we need to talk." Michael nodded, his heart rate increasing. "I figured as much. Why don't we sit down?" They moved to the living room, sitting on opposite ends of the couch, a physical distance that mirrored the emotional chasm between them. Jessica took a sip of water, then set the glass on the coffee table, her hands trembling slightly. "Dad, I know I haven't been the best daughter," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I've said and done things that hurt you, that push you away. And I'm sorry." The apology, so long overdue, caught Michael by surprise. He had imagined this moment countless times, had rehearsed his response, but now that it was happening, he found himself at a loss for words. "Jessica, you don't have to—" "No, Dad, I do," she interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "I need to say this. I've been thinking a lot about us, about our relationship, about everything that's happened between us. And I realize now how much I hurt you, how selfish I was. Michael listened, torn between skepticism and hope. Was this genuine remorse? Was it leading up to a request, a favor that required this preamble of apology? Jessica continued, her words coming faster now, as if she had been holding them in for years. I was young and stupid, Dad. I was so desperate to fit in, to be like everyone else at school, that I lost sight of what was important. I was ashamed of our situation, not because there was anything wrong with it, but because it was different from what my friend had. I took out my insecurities on you, and that wasn't fair. Tears welled in Jessica's eyes as she spoke, and Michael felt his own emotions rising to the surface. This was the conversation he had yearned for, the acknowledgement of his sacrifices and the validation of his love for his daughter. I know I can't undo the past, Dad, Jessica said, reaching for his hand. But I want to try to make things right between us. I want us to have a relationship again, if that's still possible. Michael squeezed her hand, the years of hurt and resentment melting away in the face of her apparent sincerity. Of course, Jessica. That's all I've ever wanted. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken history settling around them. Then Jessica took a deep breath, her expression shifting to one of apprehension. Dad, there's something else I need to talk to you about. Something important. Michael nodded, bracing himself for what was to come. What is it, sweetie? Jessica hesitated, her eyes dropping to their joined hands. When she looked up again, her expression was one of vulnerability Michael hadn't seen since she was a child. I need your help, Dad. And not just any help. I need something only you can give me. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Michael studied Jessica's face, searching for clues about what kind of help she needed, what favor she was about to ask. Her expression was a mixture of hope and apprehension, as if she feared his reaction even as she prepared to make a request. What kind of help, Jessica? Michael asked, trying to keep his voice neutral despite the turmoil of emotions churning within him. Jessica took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around his. Before I tell you, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to ask isn't easy for me. It's taken me a long time to even consider it, and I wouldn't be asking if there were any other way. Michael nodded, his mind racing through possibilities. Was she in financial trouble? Legal trouble? Health trouble? Each scenario brought with it a different set of complications, a different measure of what he would be willing to do to help. I understand, Jessica. Just tell me what's going on. Jessica hesitated, her eyes dropping to their joined hands. When she looked up again, her expression was one of vulnerability Michael hadn't seen since she was a child. You know, I've been working in finance since I graduated, she began, her voice softer now. And I've done well, really well. I have a good job, a nice apartment, a life that I've worked hard to build. Michael nodded, aware of the basics of her career from their sporadic conversations. He knew she was successful, that she had achieved the financial security and social status she had once craved so desperately. What you don't know is that my success has come at a price, Jessica continued, her voice trembling slightly. I've made some compromises along the way, decisions that seemed right at the time, but have put me in a difficult position now. Michael's protective instincts kicked in, his mind immediately jumping to the worst-case scenarios. Are you in some kind of trouble, Jessica? Legal trouble? Jessica shook her head quickly. No, nothing like that. It's more complicated than that. She stood up and began to pace the small living room, her agitation evident in every movement. Michael watched her, waiting patiently for her to gather her thoughts, to find the words to explain whatever situation she had found herself in. Remember when I told you I was dating someone? Mark, the investment banker? Jessica asked, turning to face Michael. Michael nodded, recalling a brief mention of a boyfriend from one of their rare conversations. Jessica hadn't provided many details, and Michael hadn't pressed, assuming she would share more when she was ready. We've been together for 2 years now, Jessica continued, and things have been getting serious. We've been talking about marriage, about building a future together. Michael felt a pang of jealousy, quickly suppressed. This was his daughter's happiness, her future, and he wanted nothing more than for her to be happy, even if it meant sharing her with someone else. That's wonderful, Jessica, Michael said, forcing a smile. I'm happy for you. Jessica returned the smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. The thing is, Mark comes from a prominent family. His parents are very well-connected, very particular about who their son marries. Michael's stomach tightened, sensing where this conversation was heading. He had seen enough movies and read enough books to recognize the classic tale of class differences and parental disapproval. And his parents, they have certain expectations, Jessica continued, her voice growing quieter. They want to know about my family, about my background. And I may have exaggerated a bit. Michael's heart sank. He should have known, should have anticipated that Jessica's habit of fabricating stories about her background hadn't ended with high school. She had built her new life on a foundation of lies, and now those lies were coming back to haunt her. What kind of exaggerations, Jessica? Michael asked, though he already suspected the answer. Jessica stopped pacing and sat down again, her hands twisting in her lap. I told them that my mother was a successful art dealer who traveled frequently for work. And I told them that you were a retired professor of literature, living comfortably on a pension and investments. Michael closed his eyes, the familiar sting of her shame washing over him. Even now, even after all these years, she was embarrassed by him, by their life together. He was a retired professor in her stories, not a maintenance worker who had sacrificed everything to send her to a prestigious school. I see, Michael said, his voice devoid of emotion. And what does this have to do with me? What kind of help do you need? Jessica looked up, her eyes pleading. Mark's parents want to meet you. All of you. They're hosting a dinner party next month, and they've invited my family to get to know them better before they give their blessing for our engagement. Michael's eyes widened in surprise. They want to meet me? After all this time, after everything that's happened between us, you want me to pretend to be someone I'm not so you can impress your boyfriend's parents? The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable, a reflection of years of hurt and resentment. Jessica flinched at his tone, but didn't back down. I know it's a lot to ask, Dad. I know I have no right to ask anything of you after how I've treated you. But this is important to me, more important than I can explain. Mark and we love each other. I want to make this work. Michael stood up, his anger and hurt bubbling to the surface. You want me to lie for you, Jessica? To pretend to be someone I'm not? To play a role in this fantasy life you've created? Don't you see how wrong that is? Don't you understand that a relationship built on lies can never last? Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I know, Dad. I know it's wrong. But I'm in too deep now. I can't just tell them the truth. Not after all this time. They would never understand, never accept me if they knew I had lied about something so fundamental. And what about me? Michael asked, his voice rising with frustration. Did you ever stop to think about how this would make me feel? To be asked to pretend to be someone else, to deny the life I've lived, the sacrifices I've made for you. I did think about it, Dad, Jessica replied, her voice cracking with emotion. I thought about it a lot. That's why it took me so long to come to you, to ask for your help. But I'm desperate, and you're the only one who can help me. Michael walked to the window, looking out at the street below, his mind in turmoil. Part of him wanted to refuse, to send Jessica away and wash his hands of her and her problems. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. It was only fair. But another part of him, the father who had loved her unconditionally for 25 years, couldn't bring himself to turn his back on her, even after everything she had done. She was still his daughter, still the little girl he had raised alone, still the child he would do anything to protect. Tell me more about this dinner party, Michael said, his back still to Jessica. When is it? What would be expected of me? Jessica's voice was filled with relief as she replied, It's on the 15th, 3 weeks from now. It's at their estate in the Hamptons. They've rented a limo to pick up all the family members from the city. It's formal attire, black tie optional. Michael turned to face her, his expression unreadable. And what about your mother? The successful art dealer? Who's going to play that role? Jessica's eyes dropped to the floor. I've already taken care of that. I hired an actress through specialized service. She'll play the part perfectly. She has experience in these kinds of situations. Michael shook his head in disbelief. You hired someone to pretend to be your mother? You've thought of everything, haven't you? I had to, Dad. Jessica replied, her voice pleading. This is my only chance. Please, I'm begging you. Just this one night, pretend to be someone you're not. Help me secure my future with the man I love. Michael looked at his daughter, at the desperation in her eyes, at the vulnerability she so rarely showed. He saw the little girl who had depended on him for everything, the teenager who had pushed him away, the young woman who had built a life without him. And he saw the future, a future that might include him again, if only he could find it in his heart to help her now. I need to think about it, Jessica, Michael said, his voice softer now. This is a lot to process, and I need time to decide what's right. Jessica nodded, understanding in her eyes. Of course, Dad. Take all the time you need. Just, please say yes. For me. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the unspoken decision hanging between them. Michael's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Anger, hurt, love, resentment, hope, and fear. He wanted to help his daughter, to be a part of her life again, but not like this, not as a character in her elaborate fiction. I'll let you know tomorrow, Michael finally said, standing up. You can stay here tonight, if you want. The couch is comfortable. Jessica's face lit up with gratitude. Thank you, Dad, for everything. As Michael prepared the couch for Jessica, he couldn't help but wonder if he was making a mistake. Was this an opportunity to reconnect with his daughter, or was it just another way for her to use him, to manipulate him into serving her needs? Only time would tell, and Michael knew that whatever decision he made would have consequences that would ripple through their relationship for years to come. The morning after Jessica's unexpected arrival, Michael woke early, the events of the previous night replaying in his mind. He lay in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with the decision that lay before him. On one hand, helping Jessica would mean participating in her deception, compromising his own values and integrity. On the other hand, refusing her request could mean permanently severing their already fragile relationship. When Michael finally emerged from his bedroom, Jessica was already awake, sitting at the small kitchen table with a cup of coffee. She looked up as he entered, her expression hopeful yet apprehensive. Morning, Dad, she said softly. I made coffee. Michael nodded, pouring himself a cup before sitting opposite her. For a few moments, they drank in silence, the unspoken question hanging between them. I've been thinking about what you asked, Michael began, setting his cup on the table. About this dinner party, about pretending to be someone I'm not. Jessica leaned forward, her eyes fixed on him. And Michael sighed, his heart heavy with the weight of his decision. I'll do it. I'll help you. Relief washed over Jessica's face, her shoulders relaxing as if a great burden had been lifted. Oh, Dad, thank you. Thank you so much. Michael held up a hand, stopping her before she could continue. But I have conditions. Jessica's smile faltered slightly. Conditions? What kind of conditions? First, Michael began, his voice firm but not unkind. After this dinner party, after this charade is over, we need to have an honest conversation about your relationship with Mark. About whether a relationship built on lies can truly survive. Jessica nodded, her expression serious. I understand. And I agree. After this is over, we'll talk. I promise. Second, Michael continued. I need time to prepare. I've never been to a black tie event in the Hamptons. I don't have the clothes, the manners, the knowledge to convincingly play the part of a retired literature professor. Jessica's face lit up with enthusiasm. Don't worry about that, Dad. I'll take you shopping, buy you everything you need. And I'll help you prepare. We can practice conversations. I can tell you about Mark's parents, about their interests, their expectations. Michael nodded, considering her offer. And third, and most importantly, this is it, Jessica. After this, no more lies, no more deception. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be based on honesty and respect. Jessica reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. I understand, Dad. And I want that too. I want a real relationship with you, one based on truth. For the next 3 weeks, Michael and Jessica worked together to prepare for the dinner party. Jessica took him shopping, buying him a tailored tuxedo expensive shoes, and accessories that cost more than Michael earned in a month. Michael felt uncomfortable with such extravagance, but Jessica insisted, explaining that appearances were crucial for this deception. They spent hours practicing conversations, with Jessica providing detailed information about Mark's parents, their interests, their social circle, and their expectations. Michael learned about art, literature, travel destinations, and cultural events he had never experienced, all in an effort to convincingly play the part of a retired professor. As they worked together, Michael noticed a change in their relationship. The tension between them eased, replaced by a sense of collaboration, of shared purpose. Jessica seemed more open, more willing to share details about her life, her work, her relationship with Mark. Michael found himself opening up as well, talking about his job, his hobbies, his life in the years since she had left home. One evening, as they were reviewing the details of the fictional life Jessica had created for him, Michael hesitated, then asked a question that had been weighing on his mind. "Why did you make me a literature professor, Jessica? Of all the professions you could have chosen, why that one?" Jessica looked away, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I don't know. I guess it was because of all the books you used to read to me when I was little. The way you would bring the stories to life, with different voices for each character. You made literature seem magical, important." Michael's heart swelled with emotion. He had forgotten those bedtime stories, those quiet moments when he and Jessica would lose themselves in imaginary worlds together. The fact that she remembered that those moments had influenced her perception of him meant more than she could know. "I didn't realize you remembered those," Michael said softly. "Of course I remembered, Dad," Jessica replied, her eyes meeting his. "Those were some of my favorite memories from childhood. You always made time for me, no matter how tired you were from work. You were always there." The sincerity in her voice, the emotion in her eyes, gave Michael hope that their relationship could be repaired, that the years of distance and hurt could be overcome. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to believe that this dinner party, this deception, might be the catalyst for something real, something lasting between them. The day of the dinner party arrived with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Jessica had arranged for a car to pick them up, and as Michael dressed in the expensive tuxedo, he felt like an actor preparing for a role, stepping into a life that wasn't his own. "You look handsome, Dad," Jessica said, adjusting his tie. "They're going to love you." Michael forced a smile, his stomach churning with nerves. "I hope so. I just hope I can pull this off." "You will," Jessica reassured him. "Just remember everything we practiced. You're a retired literature professor who enjoys fine wine, classical music, and traveling to exotic locations." Michael nodded, trying to commit the details to memory. "Right. Professor Michael Anderson, retired from Columbia University, currently living off a comfortable pension and wise investments. And you're divorced from my mother, the successful art dealer, but you remain on friendly terms," Jessica added, her voice dropping slightly at the mention of her fictional mother. "Right," Michael replied, noticing the change in her tone. "Are you sure about this part, Jessica? Hiring someone to play your mother? It seems complicated." "It's the only way, Dad," Jessica insisted, though her expression suggested she had her own reservations about the arrangement. "The actress is professional, discreet. She knows what's expected of her." The car arrived, and they made their way to the designated meeting point, where they would be joined by the other family members, Jessica's fictional cousins, aunts, and uncles, all played by actors hired for the occasion. Michael felt a surge of unease as he realized the extent of Jessica's deception, the elaborate web of lies she had woven to impress her boyfriend's family. As they approached the meeting point, Michael spotted a woman standing alone, dressed elegantly in a designer gown. She looked familiar somehow, though Michael couldn't place where he might have seen her before. "That's her," Jessica whispered, pointing to the woman. "That's the actress playing my mother." Michael's eyes widened in recognition as the woman turned to face them. It couldn't be, but it was. Standing before them, playing the role of Jessica's mother, was Rebecca, the woman who had left them 23 years ago, the woman who had walked out of their lives without a backward glance. "Jessica," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. Do you know who that is? Jessica followed his gaze, her expression confused. No, should I? The agency sent me her portfolio, but I've never met her in person. Michael felt the world tilt on its axis as the truth crashed down upon him. Jessica, in her desperation to maintain her deception, had unknowingly hired her own mother to play the role of her fictional mother. The irony was so cruel, so absurd, that Michael almost laughed. What is it, Dad? Jessica asked, noticing the shock on his face. What's wrong? Michael turned to his daughter, his mind reeling from this unexpected twist. He had agreed to participate in her deception, to play a role in her elaborate fiction. But this was more than he had bargained for, more than he could have anticipated. Jessica, Michael said, his voice trembling slightly. That woman, that's not an actress. That's your mother. That's Rebecca. The revelation hung in the air between them, shocking in its implications. Jessica stared at the woman standing across the street, her expression a mixture of disbelief and confusion. That's impossible, she whispered, shaking her head. My mother, she wouldn't just show up after all these years. It has to be a coincidence. Michael's heart pounded in his chest as he studied the woman's features. The same high cheekbones, the same determined set of the jaw that Jessica had inherited. There was no doubt in his mind that this was Rebecca, the woman who had abandoned them 23 years ago. Look at her, Jessica, Michael said, his voice urgent. Really look at her. Don't you see the resemblance? Don't you see yourself in her face? Jessica squinted, her eyes narrowing as she tried to reconcile the woman before her with the faded photographs she had seen of her mother. As the realization dawned, her face paled, her body swaying slightly, as if she might faint. It can't be, she murmured, more to herself than to Michael. Why would she be here? How would she even know about this? Michael's mind raced through the possibilities, each more unlikely than the last. Was this a coincidence, a cruel twist of fate, or was something more sinister at play? Had Rebecca been watching them, tracking Jessica's life, waiting for the right moment to reappear? We need to find out, Michael said, taking Jessica's arm to steady her. We need to talk to her to understand what's going on. As they crossed the street, Rebecca spotted them, her eyes widening in recognition. For a moment, she looked as if she might turn and run, but then she seemed to compose herself, straightening her shoulders and preparing to face them. Michael, she said, her voice uncertain as they approached. Jessica, I didn't expect to see you here. The understatement of the century, Michael thought, his anger and resentment rising to the surface. What are you doing here, Rebecca? How did you find us? Rebecca's eyes darted nervously between Michael and Jessica. I was hired for a job, to play a role at a dinner party. I had no idea. I swear, I had no idea you were involved. Jessica stepped forward, her voice trembling with emotion. You're the actress? The one playing my mother? Rebecca nodded, her eyes filled with regret. I work for an agency now. We provide specialized services for unusual situations. When I received the call, I was told it was for a wealthy family who needed to impress potential in-laws. I never imagined. The three of them stood in awkward silence, the weight of years of unspoken history settling around them. Michael felt a surge of conflicting emotions, anger at Rebecca for abandoning them, pity for the circumstances that had brought them together again, and a fierce protective instinct toward Jessica, who was caught in the middle of this impossible situation. We should go somewhere private, Michael finally said, his tone leaving no room for evasion. We need to talk about this to figure out what to do. Rebecca nodded, leading them to a nearby cafe where they could speak without being overheard. As they sat at a small table in the corner, Michael studied the woman who had once been his wife, the mother of his child. She had aged, of course, but there was still something familiar about her. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the slight furrow of her brow when she was concentrating, the nervous energy that seemed to radiate from her. Tell us everything, Michael said, his tone cold with resentment. Why did you leave? Where had you been all these years? And how did you end up here now, playing this role? Rebecca took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. It's a long story, and not a pretty one. I don't know if you'll understand, or even if you'll believe me. Try us, Michael replied, his voice cold with resentment. Rebecca looked from Michael to Jessica, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. When I left, I was in a bad place. I was young, scared, overwhelmed by the responsibility of being a mother. I thought running away was the only option, the only way to escape the life I felt trapped in. She paused, her gaze dropping to the table. I know that's no excuse. I know I hurt you both, especially you, Jessica, and I've regretted it every single day since. Jessica remained silent, her expression unreadable as she listened to her mother's explanation. After I left, I drifted for a while, Rebecca continued. I worked odd jobs, moved from city to city, trying to build a new life for myself. I thought about contacting you, about coming back, but the longer I waited, the harder it became. I was ashamed, afraid of your rejection, afraid that you had moved on without me. Michael scoffed, unable to contain his bitterness. Moved on? You left me with a 2-year-old child, no money, and no explanation. I had to work 3 jobs to support us, to give Jessica the life she deserved. You didn't just leave me, Rebecca. You abandoned your daughter. I know, Rebecca whispered, tears welling in her eyes. And there's no excuse for that. I was selfish, cowardly. I thought I was doing the right thing at the time, but I was wrong. So terribly wrong. Jessica finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. Why now? After all these years, why show up now in this way? Rebecca looked at her daughter, her expression filled with regret. I didn't know, Jessica. I swear, I had no idea I would be playing your mother. The agency doesn't share details about the clients, just provides us with the information we need for the role. I only found out your name when I received the file this morning. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. When I saw your name, I almost backed out. But a part of me, a selfish part, wanted to see you, to see how you'd grown. I told myself it was just for one night, that I could play the part and then disappear again. The 3 of them sat in silence for a long time, each lost in their own thoughts. Michael felt a complex mix of emotions: anger at Rebecca's abandonment, pity for her current situation, and a reluctant understanding of how fear and shame could drive a person to make terrible choices. So what do we do now? Jessica finally asked, looking from her father to her mother. Do we still go through with this? Do we pretend, even though we know the truth? Michael looked at his daughter, at the vulnerability in her eyes, at the desperation that had driven her to this extreme measure. He saw the young woman who had built a life based on lies, who was now faced with the ultimate test of those lies. No, Michael said, his voice firm. We don't go through with this. We don't compound one deception with another. But Dad, Jessica protested, what about Mark? What about his parents? Michael reached across the table, taking Jessica's hand in his. Sweetheart, if Mark truly loves you, if his family truly cares about you, they'll accept you for who you are, not for who you pretended to be. And if they can't, then they're not the right people for you anyway. Rebecca nodded in agreement. He's right, Jessica. A relationship built on lies can never last. I should know. Jessica looked from her father to her mother, her expression conflicted. After a long moment, she nodded, her shoulders slumping in resignation. You're right, she said softly. I know you're right. It's hard to admit that I've been living a lie for so long. Michael squeezed her hand, offering comfort and support. It's never too late to start living the truth, Jessica. Never too late to build a life based on honesty and integrity. Rebecca stood up, her expression regretful. I should go. I'll call the agency, cancel my participation in this charade. Wait, Jessica said, her voice hesitant. Don't go. Not yet. Rebecca looked at her daughter, surprised by the request. You want me to stay? Jessica nodded, her eyes filled with unspoken questions. I think we need to talk. Really talk. About everything. Michael watched as his daughter and her mother began the difficult process of reconnecting after 23 years of separation. He felt a sense of hope, of possibility, that this unexpected reunion might lead to healing, to understanding, to forgiveness. In the weeks that followed, Jessica broke up with Mark, unable to continue a relationship that had begun with such a fundamental deception. It was painful, but necessary, a step toward living a more authentic life. She also began the slow process of building a new relationship with Rebecca, one based on honesty rather than fantasy. It wasn't easy. There were years of hurt and abandonment to work through, misunderstandings to clear up, and forgiveness to be offered and received. But both mother and daughter were committed to the process, determined to create something real from the ashes of the past. And Michael and Jessica, father and daughter, found their way back to each other, their relationship stronger and more honest than it had been in years. They talked, really talked, about the past, about their fears and insecurities, about their hopes for the future. Michael learned to forgive Jessica for the hurt she had caused him, and Jessica learned to appreciate the sacrifices her father had made for her. 6 months after the disastrous dinner party that never happened, Michael sat in his apartment, looking at a new photograph on his mantelpiece. It was taken at a small family dinner, just the three of them, Michael, Jessica, and Rebecca. They were smiling, their faces alight with genuine joy, the shadows of the past finally beginning to recede. The phone rang, and Michael smiled as he saw Jessica's name on the caller ID. Their relationship wasn't perfect, their history wasn't without pain, but they were learning, growing, healing together. And that, Michael realized, was more than he had ever hoped for. "Hi, sweetie," he said, answering the phone. "How are you?" As Jessica's voice filled the line, Michael felt a sense of peace settle over him. Life was complicated, messy, and often painful, but it was also full of second chances, of unexpected reunions, of the possibility of redemption and forgiveness. And in that moment, Michael knew that despite everything that had happened, despite all the hurt and deception, their story was far from over. It was just beginning.